The gunshot that tore through the silence of Willow Creek nearly startled Penelope Reed off her horse. It was 1878, and the Montana Territory was no place for a woman alone, especially not one fleeing from ghosts both real and imagined. Her hands trembled as she steadied her mount, a Palomino mare that had carried her through 3 states since she'd left Boston behind. Penelope's journey west had been born of desperation. At 23, she had lost everything: her parents to influenza, her inheritance to her father's gambling debts, and her reputation to the lies of a man she once trusted. The West represented her only hope for starting anew, though she'd quickly learned that freedom came with its own perils. A second shot rang out, closer this time. Penelope urged her horse forward, heart hammering against her ribs. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the trail, and she knew she needed to find shelter before nightfall. The settlement appeared before her like an answer to an unspoken prayer, a cluster of wooden buildings nestled in a valley, smoke curling from chimneys against the backdrop of snow-capped mountains. Willow Creek wasn't much, but to Penelope's weary eyes, it looked like salvation. As she approached the town, Penelope noticed a commotion outside what appeared to be the local saloon. A group of men had gathered in a loose circle, their attention fixed on something or someone in their midst. Despite her better judgment, curiosity drew her closer. "That'll teach you to cheat, honest men," a burly man growled, his fist connecting with the jaw of a leaner figure who stumbled backward. The crowd jeered, but Penelope saw the glint of metal as the accused man's hand moved toward his holster. Without thinking, she cried out, "Stop!" All eyes turned to her, including a pair of startlingly blue ones belonging to the man who'd been accused of cheating. Blood trickled from his split lip, but there was something in his gaze that suggested he was far from defeated. "This ain't your concern, lady," the burly man said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Perhaps not," Penelope replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "But surely there's a more civilized way to settle disputes than brawling in the street." The blue-eyed man straightened, wiping blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. "The lady's right, Hodges. If you've got a problem with my card playing, take it up with the sheriff." Hodges looked from Penelope to the man and back again, then snorted. "Fine, but I'm watching you, Zachary." As the crowd dispersed, the blue-eyed man approached Penelope's horse. "That was either very brave or very foolish, madam. I'm not sure which." "Neither am I," Penelope admitted. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 27 or 28. His dark hair curled slightly beneath the brim of his hat, and despite his lean frame, there was a strength in the set of his shoulders. "Zachary Blackett." He introduced himself with a slight bow. "And I reckon I owe you my thanks." "Penelope Reed," she replied. "And you owe me nothing, Mr. Blackett. I simply dislike seeing blood spilled unnecessarily." Zachary's smile revealed a dimple in his right cheek. "Well, Miss Reed, you've arrived in Willow Creek at an interesting time. May I ask what brings you to our little corner of nowhere?" Before Penelope could answer, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She swayed in the saddle, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd eaten or rested properly. Zachary was at her side instantly, strong hands steadying her. "Whoa there. You look about ready to fall off that horse." "I'm fine," she insisted, even as the edges of her vision darkened. "Just tired from the journey." "Let me help you to the boarding house," Zachary offered. "Mrs. Holloway runs a clean place, and she serves the best supper in 3 counties. Too exhausted to argue, Penelope allowed him to lead her horse down the main street to a 2-story clapboard building with white shutters and a small garden out front. Mrs. Holloway turned out to be a bustling widow in her 50s who took one look at Penelope and clucked her tongue in disapproval. "Land sakes, child, you're half-starved. And traveling alone. It's not proper, not safe." "I had little choice," Penelope said quietly. Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. "Well, you're here now. Let's get you settled." Zachary tipped his hat. "I'll leave you in Mrs. Holloway's capable hands, Miss Reed. Perhaps I'll see you around town." "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Blackett." As he turned to leave, Penelope noticed the gun holstered at his hip and the way his eyes scanned the street, alert, cautious. He moved with the easy grace of a man accustomed to watching his back. A gambler, perhaps, or something more dangerous. Over the next few days, Penelope settled into life in Willow Creek. She found work at the general store, helping the elderly proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, keep his accounts in order. The job paid little, but it was honest work, and Mr. Jenkins was kind. She saw Zachary Blackett occasionally, usually entering or leaving the saloon. Each time, he tipped his hat to her with that dimpled smile, but he kept his distance. Penelope told herself it was for the best. She hadn't come west to find a man, especially not one who made his living at card tables. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, Penelope was walking back to the boarding house when she heard rapid hoofbeats approaching from behind. She turned to see a rider galloping recklessly down the main street, his horse foaming at the mouth. "The Calloway gang," the man shouted as he passed. "They hit the Miller place. Set it ablaze." The news spread through town like wildfire. The Calloways were notorious outlaws who had been terrorizing the territory for months, robbing stagecoaches and ranches with increasing violence. Penelope watched as men gathered outside the sheriff's office, arming themselves to ride out to the Miller ranch. Among them was Zachary Blackett, checking the chambers of his revolver with practiced ease. "You're going with them?" she asked, approaching him. Zachary looked up, surprise flashing across his features. "The Millers have a little girl. Sarah. She's 8. He said it as if that explained everything, and perhaps it did. "Be careful," Penelope said, unsure why she cared what happened to this near stranger. He studied her face for a moment. "You should get inside, Miss Reed. Lock your door tonight." The posse returned well after midnight. From her window at the boarding house, Penelope watched them ride in, their faces grim in the moonlight. The Miller family rode double with some of the men, their expressions shell-shocked. The next morning, Penelope learned that the Calloways had escaped, but not before burning the Millers' home to the ground. The family had lost everything except their lives. It was Blackett who found the girl. Mrs. Holloway told Penelope as they prepared breakfast for the displaced family, who were staying temporarily at the boarding house. She was hiding in the root cellar, terrified out of her wits. "They say he went right into that burning house to look for her. Flames be damned." Later that day, Penelope encountered Zachary outside the general store. A bandage wrapped his left forearm, and a fresh bruise darkened his cheekbone. "Mr. Jenkins told me what you did," she said. "That was incredibly brave." Zachary shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't." "You did." Penelope hesitated, then asked, "Are you really a gambler, Mr. Blackett?" His expression closed slightly. "Among other things." "What other things?" "I was a scout for the Army for a time. Drove cattle up from Texas before that." He met her gaze directly. "I've been many things, Miss Reed. Not all of them respectable. And now I'm trying to put together enough money to buy a piece of land north of here. Good grazing, plenty of water." He smiled wryly. "Turns out I'm better at cards than saving." There was something in his honesty that touched Penelope. Before she could respond, Sheriff Taylor approached them. "Blackett, got a minute? Need to talk to you about what you saw at the Miller place." As Zachary walked away with the sheriff, Penelope couldn't help but wonder about the contradictions in the man gambler and hero, wanderer with dreams of putting down roots. Spring turned to summer, and Willow Creek bloomed under the Montana sun. Penelope found herself settling into the rhythm of frontier life, her days at the general store filled with the comings and goings of townspeople and the occasional visitor passing through. She saw Zachary regularly now, as he'd taken to stopping by the store on the pretext of needing supplies. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. She learned that he'd lost his parents young, raised by an uncle who taught him cards and cons before abandoning him at 16. He'd made his way through life since then on his wits and skill with a gun. In turn, she told him about Boston, about her parents' deaths, and the fiancé who'd revealed his true character only after her fortune was gone. "He wasn't worthy of you," Zachary said simply, and the certainty in his voice made her chest tighten with an unfamiliar emotion. One sultry evening in July, Zachary invited Penelope to join him for a ride. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said, those blue eyes alight with something that looked suspiciously like excitement. They rode north out of town, following a winding creek through meadows bursting with wildflowers. As they crested a hill, Zachary reined in his horse and gestured to the valley below. "This is it. This is what I've been saving for." Penelope gazed at the stretch of land nestled between rolling hills. A stream cut through it, bordered by cottonwoods and willows. In the distance, mountains rose against the sky, their peaks still holding patches of snow. "It's beautiful," she breathed. 1,500 acres, Zachary said proudly. "I put down a claim last week. It's mine now, or will be, once I finish paying for it." "You did it," Penelope said, genuinely happy for him. "Your own ranch." "Almost." He looked at her, something hesitant in his expression. "There's just one problem with my plans." "What's that?" "A man needs more than land to build a life." Zachary's gaze held hers. "He needs someone to share it with." Penelope's heart began to race. "Mr. Blackett, Zachary," he corrected gently. "After all this time, I think you might call me Zachary." "Zachary," she amended, his name feeling right on her lips. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that I've never met anyone like you, Penelope Reed. And I'm asking if you might consider." The crack of a rifle shot cut him off. Zachary's horse reared, nearly throwing him, as a bullet kicked up dirt at their feet. "Get down," he shouted, dismounting in one fluid motion and pulling Penelope from her saddle. They crouched behind a boulder as more shots rang out. Zachary drew his revolver, his expression hardening into something dangerous. "Stay here," he ordered, then darted between rocks, making his way toward the source of the gunfire. Terrified but unwilling to cower, Penelope peered around the boulder. She caught glimpses of movement on a ridge about 100 yards away, 3 men, maybe 4. More shots were exchanged. Then Penelope heard a shout of pain that she recognized as Zachary's voice. Cold fear gripped her heart. The shooting stopped abruptly. Moments later, the sound of retreating hoofbeats echoed across the valley. "Zachary!" Penelope called, emerging from her hiding place. She found him slumped against a tree, blood soaking through his shirt at the shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert. "Calloway's," he said through gritted teeth. "Must have been watching the property." Penelope tore a strip from her petticoat to fashion a makeshift bandage. "We need to get you to the doctor." Somehow, they managed to get back on their horses. Zachary insisted he could ride, though Penelope could see the pain etched in the lines of his face. As they approached town, Zachary swayed dangerously in the saddle. By the time they reached Dr. Whitman's office, he was barely conscious. The next hours were a blur of fear and waiting. The doctor extracted the bullet and assured Penelope that Zachary would recover, though he'd lost a significant amount of blood. "You can see him now," Dr. Whitman said finally. "He's been asking for you." Zachary lay on a narrow bed, his skin ashen against the white sheets. His eyes opened when Penelope entered, and he attempted a smile that turned into a grimace. "Some romantic outing," he said weakly. Penelope sat beside him, taking his hand between both of hers. "You scared me half to death." "Only half. I must be losing my touch." His attempt at humor faded as he studied her face. "You've been crying." Penelope hadn't even realized it, but now she felt the dampness on her cheeks. "I thought I might lose you before I had the chance to tell you." "Tell me what?" His voice was soft, hopeful. "That I think I could love a man with land to build on, even if he has a questionable past and a tendency to get shot at." Zachary's smile was worth all the fear of the day. "Is that so?" "It is." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently to his. "But you'll have to promise to be more careful. I can't bear to watch you bleed." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "For you, I'd promise the moon and stars." Sheriff Taylor and a posse rode out after the Calloways, but returned empty-handed. The outlaws had vanished into the wilderness, though the sheriff promised they'd be brought to justice eventually. During Zachary's recovery, Penelope spent every free moment at his side. Their courtship progressed in the confines of Dr. Whitman's back room, with books read aloud and conversations that stretched long into the night. By the time Zachary was strong enough to leave the doctor's care, all of Willow Creek knew that he and Penelope were courting. Mrs. Holloway tooted about propriety, but couldn't hide her approval. "He's a different man since you came to town," she told Penelope. "Steadier, more purposeful." August brought scorching heat and news that the Calloway gang had robbed a bank in Helena, killing 2 people in the process. The territorial governor put a substantial bounty on their heads, and bounty hunters began passing through Willow Creek, following rumors and leads. Zachary grew restless as his wound healed. Penelope often caught him staring northward, toward his land, their land, as she'd begun to think of it. We could start building before winter, he suggested one evening as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name. Nothing fancy at first, just a cabin to get us through until spring. Us? Penelope asked, her heart skipping. Zachary stopped walking and turned to face her. The setting sun painted his features in gold and shadow, making him look like something from a dream. I was going to wait, he said, do this properly with a ring and all. But life's too uncertain for waiting. He took her hands in his. Penelope Reed, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Joy bubbled up inside her like a spring. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will. Their wedding plans were simple: a ceremony at the small church, followed by a celebration at the saloon, which the owner had promised to clear of its usual clientele for the occasion. 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. Penelope was working late at the general store when Mr. Jenkins left to deliver an order to the smithy. Minutes later, she heard shouting and the sound of breaking glass from the saloon across the street. She went to the window in time to see 3 men burst out of the saloon, guns drawn. Even from a distance, she recognized them from descriptions that had circulated the Calloway brothers. Without thinking of her own safety, Penelope stepped outside, concerned only for Zachary, who she knew was playing cards inside. The middle brother, Calloway, spotted her and grabbed her arm as she tried to retreat. Well, what have we here? He leered, his breath sour with whiskey. Let me go, Penelope demanded, struggling against his grip. She'll do nicely as insurance. The oldest brother, John, said coldly. Bring her. Zachary emerged from the saloon just as they were forcing Penelope onto a horse. His shout of rage cut through the commotion as he drew his gun. Let her go, Calloway. Drop your weapon, Blackett, or the lady gets a bullet, John Calloway called back. Penelope saw the agony of indecision on Zachary's face before he slowly placed his gun on the ground. Smart choice, John said with a cruel smile. Now, we're riding out of here, and if anyone follows us before dawn, the woman dies. Understood. The Calloways fled town with Penelope as their hostage, heading into the hills where they'd made their hideout. Terrified but determined not to show it, Penelope memorized every twist and turn of their journey, noting landmarks whenever possible. The outlaws' camp was a crude affair: a pair of canvas tents and a lean-to in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. They tied Penelope to a tree, ignoring her demands to know what they intended. Shut up, Calloway snapped. You'll find out soon enough. As night fell, Penelope worked at the ropes binding her wrists, rubbing them against the rough bark of the tree. The Calloways drank and argued, occasionally casting menacing glances in her direction. What's Blackett to you anyway? The youngest brother, Tom, asked when he brought her water. He's my fiancé, Penelope replied defiantly. Tom Calloway smirked. Not for long. John means to kill him when he comes for you. What makes you think he'll come alone? Because he loves you, Tom said simply. And men in love do stupid things. Penelope renewed her efforts to free herself, ignoring the pain as the ropes cut into her skin. She had to escape before Zachary walked into their trap. Near midnight, she managed to work one hand free. The Calloways had grown careless with drink, and only Tom remained on watch, dozing by the fire. Moving silently, Penelope untied her other hand and crept toward the horses. She had nearly reached them when a twig snapped beneath her foot. Tom jerked awake, his hand going to his gun. What the? Before he could raise the alarm, a figure emerged from the darkness behind him, clamping a hand over his mouth and pressing a knife to his throat. Make a sound, and it'll be your last, Zachary whispered. Relief flooded through Penelope at the sight of him, followed immediately by fear. They're waiting for you, she hissed. It's a trap. I know. Zachary bound and gagged Tom efficiently. Sheriff's coming with a posse, but I couldn't wait. How did you find me? Followed your trail. You left marks: broken branches, disturbed stones. Pride colored his voice. Smart woman. Together, they began to make their way out of the camp, but luck abandoned them. John Calloway emerged from his tent, spotted them immediately, and shouted for his brother. What followed was chaos. Zachary pushed Penelope toward the cover of the trees as gunfire erupted. She ran a short distance, then turned back, unwilling to leave him. Zachary and the Calloways exchanged shots in the flickering firelight, a deadly dance of shadows and gun smoke. Penelope saw Zachary take down Lyle with a shot to the leg, but John was moving toward him, pistol aimed. Without thinking, Penelope grabbed a branch from the ground and rushed forward, swinging it with all her strength at John Calloway's head. The outlaw staggered, his shot going wide, and Zachary seized the opportunity to disarm him. "Nice swing," Zachary said breathlessly as John Calloway collapsed unconscious. The sound of approaching riders announced the arrival of Sheriff Taylor and his men. The posse quickly took the Calloways into custody, securing them for the journey back to Willow Creek and eventually to Helena, where they would stand trial. In the aftermath, Zachary pulled Penelope into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured into her hair. "You can't get rid of me that easily," she replied, though her voice broke on the words. When they returned to town, exhausted and disheveled but alive, news of their ordeal and the capture of the Calloway gang spread rapidly. The governor's reward would be substantial enough to complete the payments on Zachary's land and build a proper home. Their wedding took place as planned, though Penelope still bore bruises from her captivity and Zachary's hand was bandaged where a bullet had grazed it. The entire town turned out to celebrate, the recent danger making the joy of the occasion all the more poignant. After the ceremony, as they danced under lantern light in the cleared saloon, Zachary held Penelope close. "Mrs. Blackett," he said, testing the name on his tongue. "I like the sound of that." "As do I, Mr. Blackett." Penelope rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, in a room Mrs. Holloway had decorated with wildflowers and fresh linens. As dawn broke, they set out for their land, their future. The cabin they built was small but sturdy, with windows facing east to catch the morning sun. By the time the first snow fell, they had a home, a barn for their horses, and plans for the spring planting. Winter in Montana was harsh, with blizzards that howled around their cabin for days at a time. But inside, warmed by the fireplace Zachary had built stone by stone, they created their own world of stories and laughter and love. One evening in late February, as they sat before the fire, Penelope with her sewing and Zachary whittling a toy horse, he looked up to find her watching him, tears streaming silently down her face. "Penelope," he set aside his work, alarmed. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, unable to speak through the emotion that had overtaken her. It wasn't sadness, exactly, but an overwhelming wave of gratitude for this life they'd built together, so different from the one she'd imagined for herself. "Tell me," Zachary urged, kneeling before her. His thumb gently brushed away a tear. "Please. I was just thinking," she managed finally, "about how far I've come. How different things might have been if I hadn't ridden into Willow Creek that day." Understanding softened his features. Fate has a way of bringing together those who belong with each other. "Do you really believe that?" "I do." He took her hands in his. "I believe I was waiting for you without even knowing it." Fresh tears welled in Penelope's eyes, and Zachary leaned forward, pressing his lips to her wet cheek. "Don't cry, love," he whispered, kissing away another tear. Everything worked out just as it should. He continued his gentle ministrations, kissing each tear as it fell until, gradually, Penelope's tears gave way to a tremulous smile. "There she is," Zachary said softly. "There's my sunshine." Penelope's heart swelled with love for this man who had seen beyond her tears to the strength within her, who had helped her build a new life from the ashes of the old. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand and placing it over her abdomen. Zachary's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you saying?" "Yes." Her smile grew stronger. "Come summer, there will be 3 of us on this ranch." Joy transformed his face as he gathered her into his arms, his kisses now falling on her lips, her cheeks, her forehead, anywhere he could reach. That night, as moonlight spilled through their bedroom window, turning the snow-covered landscape to silver, Penelope watched her husband sleep. His features were relaxed in repose, boyish almost, with none of the wariness that had marked him when they first met. She thought of the journey that had brought her west, the grief, the fear, the desperate hope for something better. And she thought of how those difficult steps had led her precisely where she needed to be. Outside, the wind carried the promise of spring beneath its winter song. Inside, in the warmth of their bed, Penelope placed a hand over the new life growing within her and whispered a prayer of thanks for second chances and love found in unlikely places. When Zachary stirred and drew her closer in his sleep, she went willingly into his embrace, knowing that whatever challenges the frontier might bring, they would face them together, the gambler who'd found his home and the Boston girl who'd found her courage, building a future on Montana soil. Spring arrived with a rush of green and the birth of their daughter, whom they named Hope. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, and she thrived in the clean mountain air. As the years passed, their ranch prospered. They added to their herd each season, built a larger home as their family grew, and became fixtures in the community that expanded around them as the territory moved toward statehood. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children were asleep, Zachary would still sometimes find Penelope with tears in her eyes, tears of gratitude, of overwhelming joy at the life they'd created together. And just as he had that first time, he would kiss each one away until she smiled. For that was the way of love in the West, hard won, fiercely protected, and worth every struggle along the trail.